Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate demo for the piece I call The Captain. So this is going to be quite a different video. I'm of course going to explain my process like I usually do, but this is the first character in a new character design series. I've already posted a lot of these online and, I'm playing catch up on my channel and all that, but it's the first time that I'm actually explaining the process of these here. So let's just start diving in and I can talk about what's different about this compared to the other ones that I normally do. Whenever I start one of these character design series, I don't necessarily know that I'm doing that. Usually when I'm doing art in my free time, I don't really have a lot of goals laid out before I start doing something like this. It's more just I'm doodling and I eventually draw something that I like, and if I like it enough, I consider doing more in the same style. Something that I really love doing is establishing essentially the frameworks, the style for something, and then seeing if I can continue to execute on it and just add more characters to that lineup. So you can see here, it basically just starts with the structure of somebody kind of acting badass. And in this case, smoking something. This at this point in this illustration could have gone like any direction. Now, something those of you who've been following these characters on the various platforms might notice, or remember, I should say, as being a key aspect of them, is the rough sketch phase is like crazy colorful. And a lot of people have asked like why I do that. And if you know, because you followed me on this channel, I don't normally do that. That's actually something that I only do occasionally. Is what I'll start doing is using different colors to separate things out. By the way, you'll notice here on this like eye thing that it looks a lot like biking. When I was in the middle of doing it, I was like, oh, this is really sick, but what does this remind me of? And then I eventually realized what it reminded me of. But anyways, I then pivot, as you can see, to something different. And you can see just kind of all the exploration that I'm doing here to try to figure out what is this character going to be. But anyways, back to the color. What this is I wanted to start separating the different elements because I was being really, really messy. And I just wanted to use different colors to do that. When I'm working traditionally, if I'm really doing like a kind of elaborate process, is I start with different colored pencils and I use those different colors to separate like the stages that I'm at until I eventually get to where I'm drawing the final version. That's essentially what this is. It's just I'm kind of having a little bit more fun with it, putting down all of these different colors for kind of like each element. And every time I was done with a section and I thought that I wanted some sort of visual separation when I get to the next part, I would just change the color and keep going. So you can see at this point, I've got this character kind of doodled and they're feeling a little space piratey to me. So I decided to start throwing some like mechanical nonsense basically into the background. What is that behind her? Is she on a ship? Is she on some sort of an asteroid mining colony? Is she on Earth? It's just kind of futuristic. Obviously, I think that it doesn't really matter. The idea is that she's on like her ship, but it's really just there to try and set the tone and try to set up what this world is that she's going to be in. I don't always do backgrounds to things. If I do backgrounds, they're usually pretty simple and they're just there to support what I'm trying to sell in the character. Now, one thing to really comment on here is my line style. So when you normally see me do really, I guess, bold lines, like lines that aren't going to drop away during the rendering process, I'm usually doing really fine detail lines, or I'm using, say, like a brush pen of some sort in order to get like thin to thick. This was a really interesting process where I basically took all the taper out of the pencil, set it to like a kind of fat size for what I normally do, and then just went like right at it, usually doing like one stroke, maybe just like a couple of little ones to like build it up a little bit, but only to build it up as far as like length, or if it was going to take a turn, not to try and make it thicker. And the entire drive behind me doing that was, at the time, I just wanted it to go quickly. I didn't want to sit and really like think about it. I was just like, you know what? I don't even know if this is going anywhere. Let's just draw this really, really fast. And so I thought that if I went with this thicker line, I'd put less pressure on myself to really like refine the whole thing, and I could just keep moving. So you can see as I'm going here, I'm also in real time saying like, oh, actually I feel like I need a shoulder pad here, and then I would like add this shoulder pad, for instance. And I'm sort of trying to figure it out as I go. all while also trying to figure it out with this line where I'm saying, you know what, I could just really messily solve this. And then I've already decided on kind of like a low commitment line style, and I could just plug that in there and just keep moving. And that was like the entire spirit behind what I'm doing here. So since this did eventually become part of a lineup, all of these little decisions that I'm making are ultimately qualities that I need to carry through to the other characters. This is a personal piece. This is just like a low stakes thing. So when you're doing something like this, it's really more just a bunch of fun decisions that you've made and you want to carry through into the other characters or any other kind of like illustration that you want to do for it. If you were part of a big production team and you were actually trying to draw something for that, you were going to be working with a lot of people, maybe it was going to be a big product that you were going to work on for like a company or something like that, all of these little decisions end up being things that you put into something like a style guide and everyone then has to adhere to. So you might not just make them all on the fly and then everybody else goes with it. You might actually be putting a lot of thought into why you're making some of these decisions, unless you're somebody who already has a really distinct art style, and that's kind of also the point of some projects. There are a lot of famous artists that get assigned to a project, and then once they're there, they're brought on because they want that look and feel for the product. So if you find yourself in that position, that means that a lot of the artistic decisions that you make actually has a ripple effect over to other artists and across the entire product. I did forget to mention that after I had that really colorful rough sketch, I did flatten it and then just desaturate it. I kept all the layers because I usually do that anyways, but that was then what I just reduced in opacity in order to do the draw over. So now I'm in the flat section. I'm not using the fat pencil, or in this case the modified fat pencil, anymore. I'm using just a round hard brush, using that to fill in all of these areas. I just wanted it to be really clean, and I'm not going for something that actually looks like it's an anime or an animation, but just going for something as simple as something like that. In fact, this entire look and feel after this character, as I said, was kind of a one-off. But then what I started leaning into is the kind of like early 90s nature of like the color palette. And you'll see that continue to like sort of come through. And then as I moved on to other characters in this series, I just leaned into that harder and harder. Speaking of that idea of it all going really quickly and me just wanting it to be simple, the coloring in this is extremely simple. It's just like flats, a couple of little things for like skin, like around her eyes and things like that. And then I do this one big cast shadow, which you see right there. I just did that by taking like a soft brush and drawing it across and having, I've got all those flats so I can merge those into one thing and then just use that as a selection, which is pretty quick. And while I liked this one cast shadow, I do end up changing it. I change the angle of it and I do a few other things, but we'll get there in a second. So you can see there, I'm just adding like a little bit of gradients here or there to separate things, which is not unlike what I do with the A Village Corrupted stuff, where I have flats and lines, and then I'm just using like a little bit of gradient here or there to separate everything out. You can see me starting to mess a little bit with the background, and I'm sort of checking all my opacities and just seeing how I like these things. Oh, by the way, that cast shadow is like a bluish purplish that's set to multiply, so that's kind of how I'm getting that. I'm changing the color of the background, trying to figure out like what I want this environment to be. The background shading is all just done with black or white set to different levels of opacity to get it to be darker or lighter. You can see I've changed the angle of the cast shadow now. I just liked this one better. I liked her being more in shadow. I've got her eye glowing, so now maybe we're starting to build a story around her. And then in addition to that, you'll start seeing me take that shadow, and instead of it just being a straight line, which I thought was cool because it was flat, but I kind of didn't like how it flattened her out, you'll see me start to adjust it so that it's actually wrapping around her form. So we've got this really like graphic hair shine. We've got this really simplistic background. It's got some detail in it, but it is monochromatic. And now we've got this shadow being cast across her. And then we've got these little bits of gradients here or there to like separate pieces. I do also put a little bit there of that subsurface scattering. And then I take the parts that don't have the shadow and I actually blow them out a little bit with this like brighter orangey glow color. And that's that for this one, actually. I'm not going to go through the layers, but I'll tell you what they are. They're very, very simple. It's essentially just the line layer, and then we've got all the flats, and then we've got this shadow layer, the brighten layer, and then that sort of ambient occlusion, not ambient occlusion, sorry, the subsurface scattering layer, and like the glow of the eye, the shine of the hair, And that's kind of it. Oh, and then there's a chromatic aberration that's thrown on at the last minute too. These tricks are what I would call simple, high-impact tricks. Let's just quickly look at the lines. So this is what the lines look like. I have the background lines on a different layer, and they're just lowered a bit in opacity to knock them back. And then we've got the lines on top. They're very simplistic. They don't really have any line weight to them. And they're just kind of there to be quick. And then here we go again with the final version. So that's a look at a more recent piece with some different techniques. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you on the next video.